بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم، مساء الخير جميعا عليكم. أول شيء أشكر حضوركم وتسجيلكم في الجورنال كلاب اليوم. راح يقدم لنا الجورنال كلاب اليوم الدكتور عبدالله الثميري، دكتور بجامعة الأمير سلطان، قسم الصيدلة الإكلينيكية، تخصص اقتصاديات الدواء ومخرجاته. طيب، عنوان الجورنال كلاب اليوم يتكلم عن the burden of osteoporosis in Saudi Arabia, secured an economic model. يتكلم عن الفورمات introduction, reading the introduction about 5 minutes, discussing the objective, group reading for the method, reading the result, discussing the result, closing statement.
ممتاز، شكرا لك يا في. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. حياكم الله جميعا في our first journal club. As Faye mentioned before, in this journal club we will discuss a particular article, a very specific article entitled "The Burden of Osteoporosis in Saudi Arabia's Court and Economic Model." الارتيكل هذا أنا اخترته صراحة لأنه أول شيء أنا بحثت عن something very general and specific at the same time, related to costing technique in general, something with a clear foundation, clear objective, clear methods, also an open source article. So I invite you all, while we are sitting now, to open Google and Google the title for this article so we can continue. Now, if you allow me, just go to Google and download the article. It should be clear in a PDF format, similar to the one I'm going to show it now. It's similar to the one here. So if you also are with us, please, once you download it, just give us a thumbs up to continue. بكل بساطة العنوان الارتكل قدامك، بس ابحث عليه في جوجل وافتحه من جوالك أو من الآيباد أو من اللابتوب. مجرد أنك تفتحه لأنه راح نقرأ سوا، بلغنا بس، عطنا thumbs up ولا تم التحميل على أساس أن نتابع. شكرا لكم. تمام، ممتاز. عندنا أول واحد، حمل ناصر. Just to be clear, this journal club is kind of tailored to students, so we're going to take our time. So if you are a professional or in advanced level of pharmacoeconomy, we might utilize your skills to discuss it with us and take your input. However, it's going to be a very slow-mo, especially when we talk about the method section. I have read the article one and very quickly. So I'm looking forward to read it with you because it's going to be not an easy ride. However, it's going to be a fun ride. جهزوا نفسكم انكم تشغلون المايكات. طيب، اوكي. الحين الاغلب حمل الارتكل، بس احنا راح نذكر الارتكل، بس لو تحبون تاخذون سكرين شوت على العنوان، او اني راح انسخ لكم ايضا افضل العنوان في الشات، بحيث لو واحد دخل معانا يكون موجود، وراح اعيد نسخه في كل مره اي احد يدخل، او ممكن الاخت في تعاوني بس في نسخه. مو شرط ملف، انت تحمله من جوجل نفسه، حط العنوان عن الارتكل في جوجل نفس العنوان وبيطلع لك المفروض تبع تايلر فرانسيس من بابميد يا اخ عبد الرحمن. اوكي، so let's go. خلال الفورمات هذا انا اللينك، اوكي، maybe the link is better actually. Let me do the link. ممتازة. أنا أشكر اللي عاونوني في اللينك. طيب الآن إحنا نرجع الفورمات اللي بستخدم وأنا أنصح الطلاب فيها. هذه أول skills that we use. I found this great يعني article talked about الjournal club, how to format a journal club. And when you critique an article, you usually have to look at this point. So these points, I'm going to send it a survey to you throughout this journal club, asking your opinion when we read a section. So when we finish reading the introduction, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, then we're going to discuss the answers. Okay. Instrument I adapted from Al-Mamani handle articles from Qatar Medical Journal, published in 2019. I think it's really nice. And if you ever needed to do a journal club or evaluate an evidence, I highly recommend to go through that reference. So let's start with the obvious thing, the article itself. Going through the article here, it's an osteoporosis measurement that's published in 2019 or 2020, but started actually they're doing it probably in 2015, as we will see. It's a classical article that in objective method results conclusion, so it's not a theoretical framework article or theoretical based on article. It's a summary or estimation, as a title and say, about osteoporosis burden in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. For me, again, this is reflect whatever I say in this reflects my solo opinion or the person's solo opinions. Our team is actually the Espor Pisau or Espor Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz University chapter, and we usually distribute knowledge targeting the students. So we're going to go slowly throughout the article, and we're going to utilize voting techniques I mentioned before to make it an open format. طيب هنا أنا بعطيكم الآن الساعة تقريبا 47 دقيقة، عدى علينا 10 دقائق تقريبا في المقدمة، بناخذ 5 دقائق إلى 7:45 على أساس نقرأ الانترودكشن فقط في الجورنال. لو حملت المقال ارجع واقرأ الانترودكشن كاملة، بعدها تستخدم الباركود هنا لدو الفوتينج or answer a couple of questions in regard to the introduction, and we're going to open the table for discussion. So I'm going to be quiet now for 5 minutes. Enjoy the reading for the introduction. ممتاز. أنا أشوف الحضور ما شاء الله تبارك الرحمن كبير 46. تشرفونا جميعا. أعيد أشكركم بالحضور. I also stress back that we are doing a student activity with the Saudi BISAO, I'm sorry, BISAO Esper BISAO Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz University. So we are finishing the reading of the introduction in regard to article entitled The Burden of Osteoporosis in Saudi Arabia, Scorecard and Economic Modeling. For the introduction, we had asked people to vote. 18 people voted. Let me show the results of the vote. Maybe Faye, if you are with us, can you read the results, please? Okay, I can read it myself. Is the purpose of the article clearly describe, identify research question objectives? About 95% said yes, very clear objective. Is the literature, I'm sorry, there is an I there, review comprehensive and current? Does the content of the review relate to described research problem? Is it clearly evaluated? Here are more percentage reporting as no, 8%. We have 24 voters and increasing. يعني تقريبا half of the audience voted and half of the audience maybe had a problem voting or have not access yet for the voting. So for the introduction, it's clearly defined. Honestly, reading it, I see it's very straightforward on how the burden is mentioned. قبل ما أبدأ أنا التعليقات, is there any comment لو في أحد يبغى يشارك معنا في المقدمة؟ هل يرى أن المقدمة خصوصاً ال people who said no, the introduction is not clearly defined or the objective is not clear. Can you mention why it's not clear or any method that they should have done it to make it more clear? And for the people who vote, it's clear. Why it's clear for you? What grasps your attention in it? Okay, everything is okay. No, anyone can share with us in the mic, can raise his hand or her hand, and they can share with us. Anyone? So far, no. Okay. For me, one of the intake that I took is the article mentioned that there is a limited number of articles exploring studies in regard to osteoporosis in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And they claim there is a need for reviewed scorecard to compare osteoporosis management across 27 countries in the European nation, or actually mentioned that, and they wanted to do an analog study in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in return of the fractures. Okay.
دكتور في هيا عندها تعليق.
أيوة تفضلي.
تفضلي هيا افتحي المايك.
Actually, Haya mentioned something about the introduction. Its topic, it's about Saudis and reflective. Is that what you meant, Haya, to mention?
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. أهلا وسهلا.
أنا أشوف إن الانترو كانت شاملة للموضوع نفسه وكانت سبيسيفيك للسعوديين، فعشان كذا قلت إنها سبيسيفيك.
أوكي، إنها تيلرد للسعودية. هل في رقم معين في السعودية شدك في الانترو؟
تبع إيش قصدك؟
في الانترو هل في شيء مثلا كان محدد للسعودية في الأرقام حقتها؟ الارتكل نفسه في المقال يعني النسب كان في بعض النسب عالمية.
اي بالنسبة للفراكتشر قصدك؟ ايوه
معك. طيب في تعليق ثاني ايضا صار 27%. ايوه صحيح 27% هذه كانت in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. لكن لو بترجعون نفسها بتلقون هذه كانت من national يعني estimation from the WHO, not actually driven. Maybe the number was estimated also from the. However, احنا دائما ايضا في التعليق في المقدمه لما تروح اخر باراجراف في المقدمه وتحصل objective, you know it's a well written article, so it is there. وايضا اعتقد تصويتكم reflective to that in regard to المقدمه. معنا 26 شخص اللي صوت تقريبا within the similar objective. I think I am showing you the results. حتى النقد عليها صار اقل، كانت 8% لما اضفنا intro was clearly and direct to the osteoporosis. ممتاز. more than what mentioned in the literature rate. okay. هذا المقصود فيها الموجود الريت موجود في السعوديه، هذا اللي استفدنا منه انه اعلى من الموجود في العالم. okay. So let's go to the second part, method. The method, I would like to read it together. I honestly will go read it together. Maybe we can utilize our experience together, then vote once we finish reading it together. Okay, so let's go back to the article. Hopefully that will help all of us. Let's start with the data collection. Okay, first, before I go through the method, you see it, the method is categorized in sections, so it makes it easier to read and easier to reread again if I want to go to a specific section that wasn't clear. The data was conducted a systematic review that collected from scorecard and economic model, or wanted to collect a scorecard and economic model. They develop a systematic review protocol based on PRISMA. Okay, guideline. For me, I always teach my student PICO rule. However, PRISMA has been shown is good for systematic review and meta-analysis as well, and superior sometimes. The reference is very clear and related to that. If you click into the reference, it will take you to the reference and it will show you the what you needed to see. The going back to the methods. So they have a senior medical information specialist, a person who specialized in research, this kind of literature, looking at by PRISMA, looking at different databases. So they use multiple databases, Ovid, Midline, and Embase, and Cochrane Library, which is most of our secondary literature that we are looking at. A previous version of the research strategy was also reviewed by a second senior researcher. Another person came in and double-checked the first person, but looked at different protocol from press checklist or checklist. And then a third person or the group performed search on a gray literature. Is anyone aware of what gray literature means? هل في أحد يعرف إيش معنى gray literature؟ بالمايك أو بالتكست. اوكي، الجراي ليتريتشر هي الاريا اللي مو واضحه، احيانا تكون المصدر لها مو موثوق او يعني in between. الادب الغير منشور او منشوره في مناطق غير معتمده بشكل كبير. We include articles or they include design information, prevalence, incidence and research. يعني once they identify these, they looked at specific things within the article. Then they did screen title for abstract. Then they cross-referenced the reference list. يعني once they come up with the articles, pool of articles, they looked at the reference and they also included those references within the search. Finally, the reviewer extracted relevant information from included articles using standardized templates. يعني كان عنده تامبلت معينة يمشي عليها ويعبي بعض المعلومات سواء في البريفالنس، في الكوست، فهم بشكل مبسط بحثوا في كلمات سواء بالبريزما تشيك ليست او بريس تشيك ليست متعلقه بالاوستيوبروسيس ان ذا كينجدوم اوف سعودي ارابيا، ومن هذه الارتكلز اللي طلعت عندهم عبوا تمبلت فيها البريفالنس، فيها الكوستنج، فيها all those kind of things. Then they use the score card. The score card is from the systematic review, they adopted the scorecard for osteoporosis in Europe. هذه دراسة سابقة طلعوا فيها تقييمات للأوستيوبروسيس في أوروبا، وبناء عليها هم صلحوا عمل مماثل. هذه تعتمد على 4 دومين or 4 domains are adapted. تعتمد على الضرر الموجود من المرض, the burden of the disease of osteoporosis, the policy framework, السيرفيس provision والسيرفيس uptake. فهم هذه ال4 أشياء راح تكون في الريزلت عندنا بشكل واضح، وبيتكلم عنها في الميثود أيضا إنه كيف جمع كل واحدة منهم. We use scoring or they use scoring threshold from scope، وسكوب هذا رجع بالريفرنس ل specific article. بالنسبة للburden of illness, they use age standardized incidence of hip fractures in women to align with threshold established by Border Kines et al. هذا بحث أقيم في أوروبا أو في العالم لو بنرجع له في 17 تقريبا. Quality of life systemic fracture mobility in the world. وقارنوا هذه بعض الأرقام الموجودة، قارنوها بالأرقام الموجودة عالميا، وأعتقد إن كينس كان موجود أو جمع الدراسات الموجودة في السعودية. لو ترجع بنفس الريفرنس راح تلاحظ إن كينس أو كانس إيرال brought some Saudi numbers. طبعا هم they did not adopt the exact number لأنه الدراسة نشرت في 1995. فالjustification it's an old study. Instead of using this exact number, they use the format here from Canis. The number came from Saadat Ali, which published recently compared to the Canis of hip fracture incidents in Saudi Arabia, and they adapted that. Then they age standardized based on the Canis from the numbers that adapted from Saudi. يعني هم الطريقة standardization of prevalence عشان يجيبون البريفالنس استخدموا الفورمات حق كنس، لكن الأرقام خذوها من سادات. أوكي. وأيضا استخدموا 2010 world population to replicate كنس et al. method. في burden of illness model, they calculate the number of fragility fractures in men and women per 1000 of the population من 50 ل 89. واحنا قرينا في المقدمة ان هذول الأكثر ناس المعرضين في 2015 to 2030. They selected 2015 as standardized point because هم بدأوا الدراسة عملها في 2015 ونشروها في 2019. فهم عشان كذا اختاروا 2015. They projected the fracture over 15 years، يعني كملوا على أساس 15 سنة للأمام. They also use another reference, which is the scope project assist. They use it before actually for hip fracture probability age of women. يعني كل سنة يمشون فيها، كل ما كبر الآن بدأوا يختارون العمر هذا أو prevalence of that reported by different studies. Keep in mind that those studies are not conducted in Saudi Arabia. يعني هم جابوا والله احتمالية إن السعوديات اللي أعمارهم 50 الآن عندنا study تقول أعمارهم 50 مصابين بالنسبة هذه. في 51 المفروض إنهم لو كملوا بالترند العالمي يصابون بالعدد كذا. الترند العالمي هذه مجوبة من دراسات خارجية. We adapted this element to align with Canis et al. A systematic review, we looked at the 10-year probability of major standardization. So they used the whole thing here to adapt from Canis and the scope. But here also we did not have access to Frax probabilities. هي موجودة في السكوب استخدموا something called Frax probabilities for specific person. However, to apply that, they use a different model from the scope itself. يعني هم استخدموا الأرقام العالمية ولم يستخدموا الأرقام السعودية لأن الأرقام السعودية غير متوفرة لهم. بالنسبة للpolicy maker, it's something from a policy perspective. اللي حاب أذكره هنا لو تقرونه أيضا الpolicy frameworks الكومبوننت لها إنه هم استخدموا إنه لازم يعرفون كيف مرضى الأوستيوبروسيس يتعالجون، كم تكلفتهم، من وين المستشفيات، كم عدد المستشفيات في السعودية. هذه أخذوها من ال National Health Priority in Saudi Arabia. Also they went to the International Osteoporosis Foundation website وحصلوا دكاترة سعوديين تواصلوا معاهم عشان ياخذون their opinion, 1 or 2. Okay, keep in mind. So the policy framework adapted from 1 to 2 people. Then they did a service provision السيرفيس بروفيجن هم يعدون الخدمات الصحيه اللي يستخدمونها مرضى الاوستيوبروسيس في السعوديه، منها الاكس راي والاشياء هذه، عشان يحسبون اشياء مختلفه فيها. they use different things available for them، واستخدموا دراسه تشمل السعوديه وغير السعوديه، اقيمت في منطقه الميدل ايست. اوكي. السيرفيس uptake they use Kenneth et al. Again to assess the uptake of Frack's algorithm. They calculated the pharmacological treatment gap among hip fracture using probability of Sadat, again, Ali. So they accounted for those two publications to produce these service uptake. هنا the economical model, or maybe for us interested in pharmacoeconomics, become more interested in that part. Which is, as you can see, is the longest one that described in the article. They did a peer review model with the input of Saudi Arabia. يعني هم استخدموا دراسة سابقة again، واستخدموا نفس الموديل عليها وضعوا الانبوت من الدراسات اللي في المملكة العربية السعودية، وهذا شيء متبع في كثير من الدراسات الاقتصادية. The model estimate economic burden at cohort level، يعني النظرة الكوهورت بشكل مستمر ونظرة يعني مدى البعيد. Has input related to fractures, incidence, population, demographic, and cost, hospitalization, testing, hip fracture, surgery, and drugs. The osteoporosis experts assisted verifying the proposed inputs. Once they finished doing those inputs في الموديل, they consulted with an expert to make sure that they are following the right track. They design a model to calculate the economic burden over 1 year, an annual burden per 1,000 persons, to make it more generic and to make it a ratio that you can compare it across population. And the total economic burden over 5 cumulative years to present the burden of osteoporosis as proportion of cost gross domestic product. They divided the annual burden in 2019 from the model by the International Monetary Fund's 2019 GDP estimate in Saudi Arabia. يعني هم أخذوا متوسط الدخل من هذا المرجع على المرجع عام 2019. Also, they coordinate a costing tool. They inflate the cost before converting using over inflation period of dates. طبعا هو هنا المقصود فيها لأنه الأرقام هذه اللي مأخوذة من المرجع لتاريخ أقدم. they did an inflation rate conversion حسبوا حساب التضخم. فأنت لما يكون عندك مثلا نفرض أنه والله عندنا دراسة قالت أنه التكلفة للمريض الأوستيوبروسيس هذا بعينه أو الفحص هذا المريض الأوستيوبروسيس عام 2010 خلينا نقول أنه يكلف 2000 ريال. لما تبغى تحول المبلغ من 2010 ل 2015 لازم تحسب حساب التضخم. حساب التضخم يكون في المتوسط تقريبا في الصحة ما بين 3 إلى 5%. فthat's the inflation. They have to multiply that for each year and they did that calculation. They also did something called purchasing power of priorities. والسبب هنا أنه أرقام كثيرة أخذوها من دراسات دولية وليست مقامة في المملكة العربية السعودية، أو تكليفات إذا كانت الدراسة غير موجودة عشان تعكس التكلفة في المملكة. They borrowed something from international. وإحنا نعرف لو مثلا أنه والله قال أنه لو نفرض أنه التكلفة في السويد يكلف المريض 2000 ريال لفحص معين، ال 2000 ريال قيمتها الشرائية في السويد أو القوة الشرائية لها غير المملكة. ال 2000 ريال ممكن في المملكة تشتري لك بضاعة، نفس البضاعة في دولة ثانية تكلفك أقل أو أكثر. عشان كذا إحنا نستخدم that purchasing power parity by converting this to the BBP's in 2019 exchange rate. So they did that. Also, they looked at different skeletal muscle packs. However, they couldn't find the ratios للسعودية لكل incidents they needed. So what they did, they used Swedish fracture ratio input. والسبب إنه السويد معدل بناء عليهم the hip fracture were specific to Saudi Arabia, and also the ratio of hip fracture incidence fracture is also close to the in Sweden. So where more granular data available, يعني عندهم ratios موجودة في in Sweden countries. They borrow the Sweden ratios due to the similarity between the incidence in particular specific ratios. So again, they couldn't find the Saudi numbers and they borrow a Swedish number. And I think I repeated this 3 times in 3 different sections, okay? And they did the same thing with different modeling. Here also, a hospital length of stay published in literature, they relied on expert opinion to inform how long it takes. And they borrowed the World Health Organization suggesting the cost of hospitalization. So it wasn't from Saudi Arabia, the number here, also it was adopted from the World Health Organization. Here is probably more making sense because it's standardized across different countries. They also could not account for patient productivity of loss. والمقصود فيها هنا لما يغيب المريض عن العلاج عن الدوام بسبب المرض. So if an osteoporosis patient miss a work, we call it here a productivity loss. And usually in health economy, we account for that. نضرب راتبه في نجمع راتبه في الأيام اللي غاب فيها، معناها هذا خسر دوامه القدر هذا من المال. السبب هنا اللي ما جمعوه قالوا والله إنه أكثر الpopulation are older. That's why we didn't account, or they did not account for that. That's it for the introduction. I know it took a method. I know it took a long time, but actually the method is probably the most important part in our discussion. So that's I wanted to take an extended period of time. We will do here 2 things. First, I will leave you to read the method for probably 2-3 minutes. Reread it again if you want. That's one thing. 2, vote. I'm going to show the voting link for you now. 3, we will discuss it and I will take your interpretation of the methods. Okay, so let's start with the first thing, show you the method part. You can go here and vote, or you can go and reread the methods. We'll take 3 minutes now break for reading.
ادخلوا على الباركود اقرأوا عشان نرجع نكمل هنا.
Okay, so let me share the results while you are reading it. If you have the time, please vote while we are sharing the results. It will be an live voting. I think some of the participants want to unmute, but we couldn't. So please, if you want to discuss with us, just raise your hand and hopefully the host will be able to unmute you. So let's go with the first question while we are reading. Does the research report use of theoretical and conceptual model for the study? Does the model guide the researchers and seem appropriate? The majority of you, 84% say yes, 15% say no. So anyone who want to comment on that, either yes or no, can raise his hand and comment on regard of the conceptual model or theoretical model. لو واحد يبغى يعلق عن theoretical model can join us. No. Okay, no one wants to comment on the method? Let us follow the first theoretical, but we will go back to that. To be more specific, when I'm talking about theoretical framework, I'm talking about the first part here, when the data collection process. Was it clear? Was it obvious? Was it logical for you? Okay, now we have almost the same percent. It's consistent. For the data collection instrument clearly described, 82 say yes. Yeah, and 17% say no. Or instrument appropriate for the use of a variable, 17, 18. So the majority of you agree that the article did a good job on doing the instruments. Okay, okay. The researcher analyzed the data where method appropriate to answer specific research question. Wow, the majority of you. That's probably I will be with the no side. I will be with that person who said no, honestly, in that. Even though they describe it, but they did not analyze it. Some of the things were not clear on how they converted and what percentages. Maybe they could elaborate on that part. However, the method is, as you see, is long, and maybe that's why they withdrawn from writing that. هل أحد عنده تعليق على الميثود بشكل عام قبل ما أبدأ أسأل؟ Okay, so that the data collection, as I mentioned, probably the data collection is the clearest thing that they mentioned. However, معنا تعليق عبدالله. Okay. However, they did not actually, they included everything. لدرجة إنهم they follow good formats. However, at the end they said we included even the gray area and even it's a pros and cons. It's a good thing that they include everything and they did comprehensive review. At the same time, now it kind of signal a subjective selecting of the process, which kind of jeopardize what they did from the beginning of the steps. So if I were the one who write the article, I will stick with the two method of selecting the data rather than elaborating on other stuff. Okay. Something that I probably triggered me here, they here said we nominated a person from the International Osteoporosis Foundation to be our expert. Anonymously is good not to mention the name, but it's good if one of the authors was the one who did it, so we can know what person who actually did that. But as you can see, some of the authors work in the private sector, say maybe that's why they did not want to have their, they wanted to be as subjective as possible within that. Okay. سكور كارد اللي هنا اللي هو تقييم السكورز، وبنشوفها بشكل اوضح السكورز في الفور كومبوننتس في الريزلت ان شاء الله. في الايكونوميكال موديل، اي احد عنده تعليق على الايكونوميكال موديل؟ هل في اشكاليه لكم او في احد عنده اشكاليه انه والله اذا ادابت نمبرز فروم السويد؟ نرجع للسؤال اللي سؤال في الشات هنا، هي نفسها لما نقارن النسب معينه حقت السويد والسعوديه. أحد عنده تعليق على المقارنات مع السويد؟ Is it appropriate? Should we do this, adapt from different articles, or they should have done a micro management technique tailored to Saudi Arabia? Which one you prefer? هل لو إنه صلحوا بالطريقة هذه و adapted a model in Europe من بعض الأرقام بيوروب، أو لو صلحوا دراسة أقل عدد من البيشنت very specific على one center وأحصوا فيها الأوستيوبروسيس كاست.
يعطيك العافية دكتور، ممكن أشارك؟
تفضل حياك الله.
حيك بقيك. أعتقد عندنا بالنسبة حق السويد السكندنافيان كانتريز أصلاً السان اكسبوجر لايت أو الكلايمت عندهم مرات ممكن قد يأثر على نسب الفيتامين دي، فبالتالي الانسيدنس والبريفالنس ممكن يختلف بيننا وبين الميدل ايست أو دول الشرق الأوسط بشكل عام. فمش عارف، كذلك كان بعد النظام الصحي عندهم يختلف في رصد الحالات عندهم، أعتقد عندهم هم نظام إلكتروني فكل شيء ريكوردد يكون موجود عندهم، فممكن يكون يعني بريسايز أو دقيق أكثر. فضلا عن ذلك يمكن منظومة مختلفة، الأدوية عندهم ونمط المعالجة قد يكون مختلف. فمش عارف هل القياس هنا يكون صحيح أو خاطئ من مستوى البريفالنس. يعني ممكن احنا نقيس في دولة ممكن تكون في آسيا أو في الشرق الأوسط ممكن مقبولة تكون.
اوكي صحيح او ان if they utilize numbers driven from the Saudi، بس of course they couldn't find these numbers، يعني هم سووا very systematic.
تفضل دكتور.
بس انه السبب هم اختاروا السويد، هم الجستيفيكيشن لهم. اول شيء انا احب اشكرك اخ بشار. الثاني شيء اعتقد السبب انه وضعوها في الارتكل بشكل واضح انه الهيب فراكتشرز سيم ريشيو، فهم based on that. بس هو الفكره انه مثل ما تفضلت انت، هل التكلفه are the same or those numbers are the same the other things. نورة شملان I'm sorry mentioned that the second approach is better. Maybe they could have done micro casting techniques and based this second review on these micro casting techniques, which I think يعني احنا من الارتكل واحنا نقرا هنا يقول لك انه كل الارقام ما حصل دراسات عليها في السعوديه. فاز باحثين ان شاء الله في المجال هذا في المستقبل قدامكم امر واعد في المجال هذا انكم تبحثون. الان هو كباحث تطلع عليها وتشوف ايش النقص الموجود في السعوديه، من خلالها you can actually start a new study based on those deficiencies. We are approaching 8:20 now. بالنسبة now we will go to the second or third section, the results. We read it for 5 minutes, then we will go back to discuss that. Okay, we are back. Hopefully everyone had the chance to read or at least scan through the results. let's go with the first part and the result of the systematic review, the result of the study itself. Anyone has a comment on that? I would like to have an people engagement. Hopefully everyone can share with us for the first part, for the result of the systematic review. Anyone can raise your hands? I see, mashallah, very specialized people who former workers with us. So hopefully you can join us and add to the discussion. Any students have a comment on the results? Okay, we have 9 people actually actively now responding. Are the results presented in a clear and understandable way? 22% say no. Our finding, discussion, and conclusion, 10% say no. Are the interpretation consistent with the results? Have more of the discussion? 9% say no. Are conclusion accurate and relevant to the problem authors? 27% say no. And here are the limitations addressed. 40% say no. And we are waiting for the voting to increase. However, again, I go back to the result. Anyone has a comment on the results before I go through them? General, the whole results now. Okay. One of the main objectives for this study is to reduce the scorecard here. Anyone can explain to us join us to explain the lay card here? Okay, no one so far. Everyone's trying to come. I don't want to call names, please. Okay, so 15 people already submitted their answers or their opinions. I'm gonna go back to the later. However, this screen card, as I mentioned before, it classified the result into 4 categories: the disease burden, the policymaker framework, the service provision, and the service uptake. So they have different colors, 4 colors code they use. Green for low, I think they mention it here. Go back. High risk indicating red, then yellow indicating moderate risk, green indicating low risk, and black indicating no data. For example, there was 1 black dot associated, which is the 10-year risk. However, when we went back to if we go back to the model, we will see there are a lot of no data that adapted from the European studies. So it wasn't clear to me if the data are comparable in their meaning or not. However, I think they assume it's comparable data to some of the European estimates. Okay. Here in the tables, if we're going to go through the tables, they also estimate the age standardized incidence of hip fracture in women, over 500 women per 100,000. The crude fragility fracture among men and women aged 15 to 89 in 2019, 33 per 1,000, which is more than the worldwide estimates. And actually, one study reported similar estimates. Prevalence of osteoporosis in postmenopausal women, 34%. Percentage increase in number of fragility fracture in men and women, about 130%. If we look at here the fracture in 2019, then they submitted a projection in 2023 based on the literature that adapted from European estimates. Then they looked at the economic burden from different perspective, from hospital, from testing perspective, from surgical procedure, from prescription drugs, and the total. Here for 1 year burden, and here for 1 year burden per 1,000 patient at risk, and also the total for 5 year burden. So it's reported by Saudi riyals, also the US dollars, and the parity dollars, which is the international dollars. وتكلمت عنها. So all those estimates you can see with the totals. Their projection, even though it might signal it's a high projection, however, they did not include the loss of projection days for patients with osteoporosis. Also, they conducted a sensitivity analysis and estimate. So any number that adapted from international perspective, they tried to find similar number from expert opinions, and they standardize it. And they looked at the sensitivity analysis for length of stay of the hospital, because it has probably the least reference, fracture incidence and ratio, problem of proportion of hospitalization, also prescription drug costs, and hip fracture surgery costs. All those were included in the sensitivity analysis. That's it for the result. They also conclude probably the discussion. They discuss different parts of that. Their conclusion, so the result of the study confirmed the significant and growing economic impact of osteoporosis fractures, bearing intervention estimate of over 988 fragile fractures will occur in Saudi Arabia between 2019 to 2023, with an associated burden of over 13 billion Saudi riyal. The estimate does not reflect informal caregiver costs, long-term rehabilitation costs, unlike carry out substantial suicidal burden. Based on the scorecard, the development of national fracture registry is warranted. There are efforts to establish a greater osteoporosis awareness among the general population and increase primary fracture. So it's a very, if you look at the objective and match it with the conclusion, as most of the study will show that it's very, most of our results here will show the how it's matched. So most of you think the conclusion were not appropriate in the settings. I probably will be with the green part here, with the blue part here. However, it's also, yeah, some of the estimates are over-exaggerated, maybe. The limitation was not clearly addressed, maybe. They mentioned one point, but they forgot to mention a few. The conclusion also are accurate. Okay, that is more of a good percentage. So anyone has a comment on the result and the discussion before we wrap up the, hopefully you learned something today. At least, have you learned something today from student perspective? Any take-home messages you want to share it with other people? Something you learned today specifically? On the mic, please raise your hand. Thank you, Bashar. طيب للطلاب، بالنسبة للطلاب, I want to know, would you prefer to share the article with you so you read it before we meet, or you prefer like this format, we read it together for the future journal article that we conduct? Because I want to increase the participation. I am happy with you joining us all. However, I would love you to participate with us in the future. So which method you prefer? We keep it as it is, or we should, I think before, okay. Both, doctor? Okay. Okay, very clear. Okay, واضح جدا. So next time, hopefully next month or the month after, we're gonna share it before. We're gonna announce the title of the article. Of course, it's gonna be an open source article because we don't want any cost associated with this event. At the end, I would like to thank you. Probably over 50 people at some point were joining us. I would like to thank them all. I would like to thank Faye Hassani and Ahmed Al-Halabi for their يعني ما شاء الله تبارك الرحمن. They tried to stress for us to do this event. I told them it will probably it's a testing. This is the first time we do it, but I'm very happy with the attendance, so we're probably gonna do it again. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.
شكرا لك دكتور عبد الله، أكيد إن كلنا استفدنا يعني وحبينا الموضوع. شكرا لكم.